Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. So in today's webinar, just following up from last week when I went through the match results reader, this week what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through application 2. And what application 2 is, it's just kind of a follow on from what we did in application 1. So that's what we're going to get started on just in a moment. Now first of all, just to make sure that my sound is okay, can everybody just let me know? Hi, how you doing? Okay, so somebody can hear me after all, just to let me know my sound is okay. But I did a lot of kind of playing around with the sound this week, and so the sound should be very, very clear. Let me just make sure it might be even up just a bit. Let me just check the recording sound on it just to make sure that it's just not up that bit too loud, but it should be fine. Let me just one last check and then we'll kick off. Yeah, I'll just take it. It's up at 100. I'll just put it down to 90 because it can get a bit slightly distorted. So sound and everything should be fine. Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks Mark, Screenberry, Monkey Butler, Frank, and Joe. Okay, that's cool. Everything is good. That's pretty good. Hey Vida. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself first. So my name is Paul Kelly and I run the blog Excel Macro Mastery. And this is the blog I set up a couple of years ago, and it's all about VBA. But rather than just the typical blogs that teach VBA as kind of just bite-sized little examples, what I like to do is like get really in-depth in a post. But also I like to keep all the stuff that I do, I like to keep it very practical, because end of the day you want to use it in the real world. So there's no point in having stuff for the sake of it, because some stuff you need a lot of the time and other stuff you don't need so much. So that's what I like to kind of cover in my blog. So one of the products I sell is, or the main product I sell is the Visual Basic, so the Excel VBA Handbook. And what I'm doing today is I'm just going through the application from start to finish. So this is the second application. And in the first application, what we did was we looked at World Cup data. But what we did was very, very simple. All we did was we looked for certain records or certain matches and we just copied the matches. So what I'm doing today is different in that we're going to build up totals. And so let's have a look at how we're going to do this. So the first thing we'll look at is the actual full application. So hi, just say hi to, while this is loading, hi to Mark, Guy and Skybiker. How are you all doing? So glad everyone could make it, and welcome again, just in case I didn't say it earlier on. Now let me just clear this report. So this is what our final result will look like. So what we want to do is we want to start with our World Cup matches. So the World Cup matches is our actual data. And what we have here is a list of all the matches from the 2010 World Cup. And it's also a list of matches from the 2014 World Cup. And now the idea is that if we added matches from all the World Cups, and these are the football World Cups by the way, if we added matches from all of them, our application should still work fine as long as we keep the data in the same format. Now I'm using a table here, but actually I'm just treating it as raw data because I don't want to get onto tables. I don't get to them like until a later application. I think it's about application 4 or 5. So we'll just treat this as raw data, but I put it in a table just to make it a bit clearer and just make it easy to check our data. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through all this data, and for each team we want to get a list of all their wins, losses and draws, and how many goals they scored and how many goals they conceded. So it's quite a good application, because it's something that you do a lot of in VBA, where you run through data and you want the sum totals as you go through them, normally based on certain criteria. But in this way, we're just going to sum up all the data, because really it's enough kind of for one application. So when we run the application, then we click Generate Report, and what it will do is bring up this. So you can see also that it's sorted by wins, and then it's sorted on goal difference. So you can see that Brazil and Uruguay, they have the same number of wins, but Brazil is ahead because the goal difference is 5. So goal difference is goals scored minus goals against. Now, if the user selects another World Cup, so say for example they select 2014 and click on Generate Report, again it will bring back the data, and this time it's Germany and the Netherlands because they did better obviously in that World Cup. So this is essentially what we're trying to do. We want to get all the data back, we want to get it all summed, and we want to get it sorted. So let's go ahead and let's start on that. So we'll just close down this application. And what we do is we take our template here and we just copy this file. So the template is essentially, it's just basically a file without any source code. So it's the same as the file we just looked at, but it doesn't actually have any source code in it. Or it has the minimal amount, I should say. So in this case, I didn't want to start from scratch again, because last week we started the whole thing from scratch. So this for the second application, we just want to move on a bit further. So we'll look in the code, and it's normal when we want to look in the code or switch between VBA and Excel, we just press Alt F11. So Alt F11. And what this does then is this opens our Visual Basic window. Now you can see here that we have two modules. So we have click events, and we know from before that click events are where we put our button clicks. So when the user clicks on a button, it will call this sub, and in this sub, create report, for example, we don't want to have any other code. We just want to have calls to other subs. And what this does is it makes our life very easy, because if we want to add buttons or we want to change the different subs that click buttons, it makes it very easy, and it makes it very easy to see where these subs are held. So that's why we do it like this. Now we have a report main module, and this is where we're going to put in kind of the main code of our application. But as I did last week, we're just going to start off by building a nice structure before we actually get down to writing any code. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to clear the report area. So the reason for this is very simple. Anytime that we're creating some kind of application, so that we're writing out data, what always happens is we have to create this application maybe like 15-20 times. We have to run it until we get it right. So rather than manually deleting the data all the time, we just create the clear reports data at the start. And a second issue is that if we don't have a clear report, so we want to run the clear report before we generate the report. And the reason is that we don't want any existing data to appear in our report, so that our results won't be tainted. We want to be just 100% sure that what we have is the correct data. So that's why we do this first. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the name of the worksheet. So I won't cover this too much this week, but if you look in the properties window here, what we have on the left, you'll always see sheet 1 and sheet 1 in parentheses. So what's in parentheses is the worksheet name. So it's the name on the bottom of the worksheet. And what's on the left is the code name. Now the reason I mention the code name is we can take the code name and we can just use it directly. So let me just double click that back in. So we can just use it directly like this once we have the code in the same workbook. So that's the important point. So we want to get a range, and then with that range we're going to clear it. So we're going to do the clear. So what we use is a constant. So a constant is basically just a variable. So it's a variable, but it can change while our code is running. Now the reason we use it is, first of all, we don't want anything that we consider a constant to change. So we don't want these values to change as our application is running. And the second thing is that we can put all these kind of configuration values in one place. And the final thing is that it makes our code readable. So we have report range here in all over our code, rather than just having kind of random ranges. So we can see at a glance, if we look back in our code in maybe a month or whatever, you know, we can see like what our code is doing. So at a glance we say, okay, I get it. Whereas if you look back at your code and you see stuff like not just numbers, sometimes you're wondering, well, why did I use 5 there? Why am I using this column? Or what is this column for? So it's just to make your life a bit easier. So sorry, someone's just asking, do you use form buttons or ActiveX buttons? I normally just use normal form buttons. So just the normal button I drag onto the worksheet. So it depends on what you're trying to do, but generally speaking, like end of the day, you're just clicking the button and it's just running something. So generally speaking, the normal button will do the job. So what I want to do here, first of all, is clear everything. So we use clear, and then we want to just set the widths back to normal. So the column width, that might change because when we run it, it changes. So we just want to set that back to normal. So we do this, hold on, let me just, so column width, and we just assign that, and then we have a variable, and that's column width default, which we can see up here. So again, another constant. So rather than just having this random value that we might say, in the future we might say, well, what's this all about? We can see clearly why we use it. And so this code will clear the report area. So when we click the button, it will go into our click events, which is here, and this will go into here. So just to show you that, let's just put a breakpoint right here. So we click on clear report and it goes in here. So we just step into the code. So we can step in using these. So that steps over. We want to step into this sub and just see. So it steps in and it goes to these and it does the clear and it does the column width. So we've nothing there, so we don't see anything so far. So that brings us in to the clear report. So what we want to do, as usual, when we ever do stuff like this, is we just want to test it. So we can test it by just placing random values around here, and we want to kind of stretch it a bit. So we just put them down a bit further, just to make sure that it's going down, you know, that it went the whole way down to our columns, so that we know that when we run it, that we know that it's working for sure. So we click on clear. Let me just get rid of this guy, and when we go back here, you can see that it removed everything. So we've done the clear thing. So that's going to make our life a nice bit easier now as we start to go through it. So we know every time we won't have to be clearing our data as such. So somebody said they're hearing two voices. Let me see. I have it. Yeah. Maybe there's an echo on it. Let me just turn down. I don't have any volume in the background unless there's just an echo that you're hearing. You see this const clear, that's string. Yeah, okay, let me see that. Yeah, so by right. So Matthew, you're just saying by right. Yeah, by right, I should really say like as double here. And can const be set as range? I don't think it can, because let me just try it here. It depends, because what is set as a constant has to be kind of something that isn't changeable, if you like. So let me just say as constant as range equals, and sheet report. See, you see, this kind of stuff kind of happens when the application is running. You know, the way that it gets something. So I'm not sure that it would actually allow us. But let's just try it just for the fun. And so it doesn't. So let me just see what. But I think it's because it doesn't consider it. It doesn't consider it a constant kind of. It'll say it. Hold on, let me just add this. Expected type name. So const t as range. Yeah, it equals. So I mean, even if we leave this out, so const t, and we just leave it out as this. Yeah, it does it like that, but I don't know. Maybe let me just compile this. Yeah, this was the error I was actually looking for. Const error expression required, because this range gives back a value based on the parameters that you give it. So it's not strictly speaking a constant, and that's why Visual Basic doesn't allow you to use a constant. Whereas when you use a number like this or a literal character, these are constants. Like they're always going to be the same. So yeah. Okay, yeah, no problem, Matthew. Yeah. So the idea is that a constant. That's why constants are kind of useful. Like, they're very simple. So when you see a constant at a glance, you kind of know straight away what it is. Whereas with a variable, a variable can be assigned a value like in kind of a multitude of different ways. Okay, so we cleared the value, and now the next thing that we want to do is we want to get on to our main application. So create report is our guy here. Now the first thing we want to do is turn off the functionality. So we saw this last week. We just basically turn off the functionality, such as calculations and everything, and then at the end of our application, when everything is okay, we turn it back on. Now there was a typo, I think, in one of them. Someone pointed out where it actually turned. Oh, it wasn't in this application actually. No, it was just that I had it turn off at the end rather than turn on. But I've actually updated that now. So what we want to do is we want to use a dictionary in this case. So before we go any further, let me just explain what a dictionary is. So normally when we have values, so actually I'll leave this out for the moment. So normally when imagine we were storing something like fruit. So we store apple, and we store orange, and we store pear, for example. And this is how it would look like in an array would look like in memory, or a collection. So they're basically just a list of items. But a dictionary is a similar structure, but it has one kind of big difference. You can store a key and a value, and the key must be unique. And the reason this is useful is that it allows us to store a key and to store a value with the key. So it means that we can easily retrieve it. So for example, if we read apple and we place a value in apple, and then we read further down and we find more data that has to do with apple, we can easily just access that item using the dictionary and using apple as the key. Now if we were to do that in an array, you have to read through every item and compare it. And also an array, you'd have to store kind of an object there where you would have like two values, maybe the name and maybe the value that you want to change. So this is why the dictionary is useful. Now the dictionary is like a real world dictionary, in that in the real world, a dictionary has a key, and the key is the word. So every word in the dictionary is unique. And if you want to find a definition, you don't read through the dictionary word by word. You basically go to the word you want and find its definition. And another example is a phone book. So in a phone book, a person's name and address would make up a unique key, and then the value would be, of course, the phone number. So that's why what a dictionary is, and why we're using one this time is so when we read a theme, we can easily go back and find that theme and update the values. Whereas with an array, we'd have to read through every item, and it would be just a bit more tricky. So there's two parts to what we're going to do. We're going to read the data to an array, or to a dictionary. So we create a dictionary as follows. So a dictionary is actually, so it doesn't appear up here. So what we're going to have is a scripting dictionary. So I'll just put it up here now. Actually, I'll just delete this. Let's just delete this for the moment. So the dictionary is outside of VBA. So we just have to do one small thing. We have to add a reference, and the reference is Microsoft Scripting Runtime. Now, we go down here, there's a load of stuff that you never use, but we just have to add Microsoft Scripting Runtime, which is here. And if we add scripting here, and just control space, which I always use just to do the IntelliSense, and then we say, you can see that it has the dictionary there. It has other stuff too, but the dictionary is what interests us. So this creates the dictionary. So dictionary is similar to how an array works and how a collection works. And if you want more on the dictionary, you can just go to the page. Let me just see. I have a couple of links here. So these are just two links, just to that I'll just paste. So using the code name of the worksheet. Let me just delete that because. So the VBA dictionary. So if you want more about the VBA dictionary, it's just in this blog post, and you can see it right at the top. So right at the top of that link, there is a table, and it shows you everything that you do with the dictionary. So kind of a shortcut guide if you want to go back to it. So we've created our dictionary, and what we want to do is we want to have a function called read from data, and we want this function to return a dictionary. So this reads the data into a dictionary, and then we give this to another guy called write report, and he creates the report. Now the reason we do this in programming is that Yeah, sorry, Garrett, you were asking will I make it available later? Yeah, I'll leave this replay up for 24 hours. So you can use the same link to access this replay in the next 24 hours. And it will be available there. So the reason we do it like this is that a lot of time when people start programming, they tend to read and write, they'll read the data and write the data in the same sub. But what you want to always do is you want to separate reading the data from creating the report. And the reason is that you might get the same data and you might create a number of reports from it. So by having all the code mixed together, it means you have to rewrite what you have, and it can get quite messy. But if you just have one read from data, all you know is that returns a dictionary in the correct format. And all write report knows is that it's receiving a dictionary in the correct format. So they don't know anything about each other. So it's very easy to create just a new report, and it's very easy to create a new data item. Now another reason it's useful is that if we decided in the future that we're going to read the data from a database rather than from a worksheet, we don't have to change write report at all. As long as write report gets the dictionary in the correct format, it doesn't care where the data originated. So it could have come from an email, it could have come from a flat file, it doesn't matter. So, and also it just makes our life easier because we can write the code to read the data, make sure that this is working, and then write the code for the report and kind of write them as standalone. So it's kind of a simple thing that we do, but very, very useful. So I'm just going to copy in the code here for this. And so this is the read from data, and this is the write report. So I've just put a debug print in here. And the reason that I've done that is, so I'm going to run the code again, and then we can just see that like what we have is working so far. So of course, debug compile, we'll just use this. And so that worked. Now you can see that it's grayed out there. So when it's grayed out, what it actually means is that there is no errors, so it didn't find any problems. So we go to our World Cup overall here. Okay, that kind of minimized a bit too much. So let me just bring this across like this. So when we click on generate report, in our immediate window, it should print out the values. So it should print out read from data and write report. So let me bring that back up and let me just, so generate report, and you can see down in the immediate window then, I'll just bring that up on the screen, you can see that it printed out read from data and write report. So again, we haven't written any code that's really too exciting, but we know what we have so far. We have a good structure in place. We've separated our read data from write data. So we have our turn off functionality in place and turn on functionality. So we know we've got a good structure. So now that we have a good structure like this, we can tackle stuff one at a time. So let's tackle the read from data first. So what I do here is I create another module. I'm just making this a very kind of very kind of neat kind of application. So we'll call this report read. Now if we had a number of reports, obviously we wouldn't say report. We could say report totals read and something like that. And what we want to do is just have all our read kind of subs in the one place. So we'll copy this and we'll put them here. So we'll make this one public because it's public by default, but I always think it's good to explicitly state that. And so this is kind of the public one, the one we'll access. And typically most other ones we'd have in read from data would probably be kind of so all the other ones that we'd have would be private, generally speaking. So we'd access here, the other ones would be private. So it makes it it gives it a nice, easy kind of interface. So one thing I always like to do, so we know before we even look at what we're going to do, we know that we're going to create a new dictionary here, and we know we're going to return a new dictionary. So let's return the dictionary before we do anything. We've nothing done, but we can say set read from data, which is the name of our function. So let's return the dictionary. So returning the dictionary, and then let's create the dictionary. We declare it here and create it. So, and we have to do something in between here, obviously. But it's good to get this first. It's kind of making your life easy. You're kind of getting it's very easy to think of these items to do and get them out of the way. So you're not thinking, okay, how do I return it? How do I do this? And now what we're going to just do here as well is a bit more kind of housekeeping, is we're going to create another sub and we're going to call that report write. Now the reason we have report write is It's more of a reason than having the other one, is because we're going to do a lot of stuff in report write. There's going to be lots of subs in it. So that's why we want to have a different one for this. Now, if we just had one write report and one read from report, we don't really need to do the modules. But it's just that you'll see as when we get to it that it makes it much easier. And again, I'll just make these explicitly public. Now it's the same thing, but I just like to say it. So let's go to report main again, or report read. Now one good thing, let's do a debug compile. So again, just a sanity check that everything, because maybe we've made something public or something private or something like that. So it's just good to give ourselves just to make sure that everything we've done so far is working. And what we can do as well, if we like, is we can just click on generate report, just to show that it doesn't do any errors and that it basically brings up our data. So it obviously doesn't bring up read from data anymore because we deleted it. Okay, so far so good. So let's go and let's get down to the crux of what we're doing. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to read the user's settings. So let me make this guy bigger. So our user settings are here. So we want to read these off of the workbook or the worksheet. So we create a variable for these. So as I'm always saying, I like to actually read into variables because it makes our code very readable. Now in this case, we're reading it, it's a string because the workbook is the string name. So we set the year equal to, so CN report, again, this is the worksheet report. So this is the one on the left in our properties window. And we want a range within that. And now the range that we have within that is going to be a constant again. So, and the constant is going to be cell user year. Now I have the constants down here, so I'm just going to paste them in rather than copy. One thing I didn't say at the start is very important, is that you should, when you're going through the applications, you should type in the code. It's really, really important because it's so easy just to copy and paste everything and say, okay, I get it, I understand it. But when you type in the code, you really get to see how it's working. But also you make mistakes, and it's by fixing those mistakes that you really learn about how the code is working. So it's very, very important to type in the code as you go through it. So cell user year is basically C4, and then cell user workbook is C5. So we can just copy this line again and basically just make a small change here. So cell and add in the workbook, and then of course make this workbook. So this gives us our user variables and just makes life a bit easier now. So when we look at our code, we can see exactly. So what we want to do is we want to open our workbook. So again, I always like to start things, start at where I'm working to, not too far ahead, but we know if we're opening a workbook, we're going to use workbooks open. So the first thing we think of is, okay, what is the name of the workbook? So that's the file name of the workbook. And the name of the workbook we're going to open is S workbook. We know that it's S workbook because we've just read it. Now we also want to add the path or the folder that goes there. So we're just going to add the folder from the current workbook, and we can get this using this workbook and then using the path property. So this gives us. Now let me just turn off this. So I'm getting those errors because it's basically the auto syntax check. So I normally have that turned off. So this gives us the file name, and now the next thing we want, you can see that workbooks open. It has a ton of parameters, but we don't need them. They're optional parameters, which means that there's a default value, so we don't need to really change them. But we want to change read only, or we want to use read only. So we can either use it in two ways. We can do this. We can use commas to get us onto the one that we want and just say true. But this doesn't really make our code that much readable. So what I like to do is to specify exactly. So again, make it explicit what we're doing. So read only equals true. Now there's two reasons we're making this guy read only. And the first one is that if someone else has it open, it's very easy to open it. So even if another user has it open, it doesn't make any difference. And the second reason is if we're not going to make a change, we don't want to accidentally change the file by accident. So having read only will prevent that, and it will also make us aware if we have a rogue line of code that's actually writing to the data. Okay, yeah, okay, Derek, yeah, you lost sound for a second. Okay, but oh right, Grant, you're okay, cool. So the workbook's open is going to open the workbook, and we want to put this in a variable, of course. So let's set a workbook variable equal. So we're going to put it here. So let's declare this workbook variable. So you see, I kind of work a small bit backwards. So I always find it's kind of useful to do, because you kind of see where you're ending up, and then you can easily get the steps back to it. But again, I'm not starting at the very end, but just just a couple of steps on. So we have the workbook. So once we have the workbook, what we want to do is we want to get the worksheet. So let's create the worksheet variable. So again, we did all this last week, so I won't spend too long on it. So we basically say sheet data equals the workbook, which has a worksheets collection, and we want to use the worksheet, which is the year. So remember, the workbook with the World Cup results, so each worksheet has the year as its name. So 2010 for the results from 2010, and 2014 for that year, and so on. And so if we added more, we'd have the other years. And so that gives us back the worksheet, and then we can just get the range. And the range that we want to do is going to be the current region. So let's get the range of data, and that's a range. And then we set the range data equal to current region. So you see, we always need a workbook, and we need a worksheet, and we need a range. Now when the code is in the current workbook, as you can see, we can just go directly to the worksheet code name. So we don't need to worry about the workbook, because once we use the code name, VBA knows we mean the current one. So Monkey, you're just asking, do I ever use named ranges? To be honest, I don't really. I mean, you can use them if you like, but the problem is that you're kind of, I mean, it's not the end of the world to use them, but the problem is you're kind of tied into the spreadsheet, and if you copy the code somewhere else, then you have to go and recreate the named ranges there. So again, it's not a huge problem, but it could be a bit messy in certain cases. So it kind of depends, but personally, I don't really use them so much. So this brings me back to range. So what I want to do is I want to get the range of data. Now, again, what we discussed before is that if we want to get the rectangular data, all we do is we put in the range. Now the data range start is what we're going to use. So this is basically just A1. So this is our worksheet. And if we say current region, this will basically give us back a rectangular amount of data. So let me just explain that, just in case you weren't here last week. Let me just explain exactly what current region is. So if we have some data here, like so, and let's just go over here a bit as well. And so if we have data like this, and we do range, so say we do range D, we can do D4 or we could do F6, any of these ranges. If we say from that range I want the current region will return all this data as the range. So what it's essentially doing is it's using the blank cells as a border. So it's using all the blank cells below and all as a border. So even if we had data here, it would still return us just this block here. Now if we have data here and we do a current range or a current region, it will go down to here. So the idea is that the current region is very useful. So basically VBA will do the heavy lifting here, and it will get us all the nearby data. So it's very useful if we have rectangular data, which we do have in this case. So kind of tablature data, if you like, for want of a better description. So let me just push this up the screen a bit so that we can all see it. And so that gives us back the current region. Now, when we have the current region, sometimes we want to get rid of the header. And to get rid of the header, what we're doing is we're basically we're just pushing down one row. So to push down one row, we use offset. So offset moves the range down one row. So we do range and we do. So what we had here, so sorry, that should be range data. So we're saying the same range data that we've just got, we just want to move down one row. So what this does is this moves us off the header. But the problem is that we still have one extra row. So we just want to remove that row, and we remove it by resizing the range to its current size minus one row. So the current number of rows minus one. And of course, now we want to test. So we've done a bit here. We want to test it. So let's print out the address of this range. And if all has gone well, this should print out the range into the immediate window. So if all has gone well, this should print out the range of A1. I think it's to K135 or something, but we can just check it. We'll just check it after we run it. So let's open this and let's generate the report. And we got an error here. So it couldn't find World Cup matches. And that's because we need to have a backslash here. So we need to have a backslash in here. And let's run it on again. And so it prints out A2 to K65. So A1 was our original data, and then we got rid of the header, so we moved down one, and K65 is down here. So K and stage is on K. So that's indeed correct. So let's close this guy out. So far so good. Now I do this later in the instructions, but what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to close this workbook again. So we'll just close this so that I don't have to keep manually closing it. So it depends. When you're debugging, normally you keep it open because you kind of want to check if your values are correct. So as you go through, you might check your data and make sure what it writes out it's fine, and so on and so forth. So that's why we do that. So the next thing we want to get onto is the class module. So before that, let's actually add our for loop. So the for loop basically allows us to read through the data one at a time. So we use a for loop as follows. So we're using a for each, which is kind of a variation on the for loop. So we're basically saying for each row in reg data rows. So what this is saying then is, so sorry, I'll just a couple of questions there. So Matthew says, so collections such as workbooks or worksheets are written as plural, but the variable is single. Okay, that's a good question, Matthew. Yeah. So what we have here is worksheets here. When it's plural, worksheets refers to the collection. Yeah. So it refers to a collection of worksheets. So that's why it's plural. It's basically the worksheets of the workbook. And again, in this situation, this is slightly different, but it's kind of saying of the workbooks items open. So just general workbooks item, open something. So when it's referring to kind of a group of items, and the same from worksheets. But when we get back this, we actually only have one worksheet. So this is a variable of one worksheet, and it will point and allow us to do something with one worksheet. But this is a worksheets collection. So yeah, exactly. So that's plural. So how can you view so Scott, you're asking how can you view application 1? Yeah, application 1 is part of the VBA handbook. So so if you go to the website, the Excel VBA handbook, that's where you can purchase that from. So it's part of the VBA handbook is made up of 10 applications, and application 1 is the first one, and I covered it, say, last week. So yeah, so some of the things I'm moving on from because I don't want to kind of cover the exact same stuff. So as I go through the applications, so application 2 kind of has the same stuff, but I don't want to spend as much time on it. And application 3 then moves a bit further, just so that we're not repeating the same stuff again, if that makes sense. So anyway, getting back to the application. So this gives us back all the rows. So the rows is another collection. And what we do is we say, give us a range each time. So for each means for each row for each row in the rows, we're going to do this. So each time it puts a row in here. So the first time it'll put row 1, the second time row 2, and the third time row 3. And then each time we can do something with the current row. So we'll do something here like give us back some value. So we're going to get the cells in this case. So call it data. And we want to put that, of course, in a variable. So we'll call the variable team1. So this is the column team1. And now, of course, we have to declare a variable before we use it. So this is a range. So this is going to read team1. So if we go and let's open up our data so that we all know exactly what we're looking at here. So looking at our data again, you can see that team1 is in column E. And we want to read team 1, the score 2, and team 3. So we're not worried about the other data. For this particular report, we don't care. These are just the items that really interest us. And so we're reading the team 1 here. So team 2, we're going to read very similar way. So we can just copy and paste this code. And you can see if you put lines of code like this underneath each other, it makes it very, very readable. We can see if there's a mistake here very, very quickly. So let's just declare these variables. So they're both strings, obviously. And team2 as string. And we also want to read goal 1 and goal 2. And goal 1 and goal 2, we're going to call them long. So what a long is an integer. So the reason there is an integer data type, but we don't use it because it only goes up to 33,000. It's only like 16-bit. So the problem is that if you have a value over 33,000, your application, you'll get an error. So we use long integer, and the value in long integer goes up to like 2.5 billion or something. So that's why we use long rather than goal. So it can be confusing because it's not obvious. And long is something that comes from like back in the 90s when we used those kind of data types. So again, we want to do a very similar thing here. We want to get the goal. And we want to say goal 1 equals, and again, very similar item, but this time we're going to just use goal. You can see when we have our constants created already, it's very easy to find the ones that we want because we do IntelliSense and it will bring it up, and we've actually called them score. And then again, we copy this, and underneath you can see. So you can see that it's very similar, and that if there was an error here, that it's very clear. And if you want to add more columns, it's very clear. So that's why it's nice to do it like this. So if everything is going according to plan like we think it is, this should be reading the correct data each time. So just to check that it is, what we'll do is we'll print out all the team names to the window. So we'll print team 1, goal 1, goal 2, team 2. And if all has gone well, this should print out the values to our immediate window, which will just clear like this. So all good here. Let's bring this up. Yeah. Oh, I probably answered that question. You're asking, does the for each loop automatically dim the variable? And that's a good question, because in some of the other languages like C++, you declare the variable in the for loop. But no, in Visual Basic, you have to declare the variable with a dim statement. And Matthew, you're asking, so for each, yeah. So the thing with the next loop is this. You're asking about, do you need something here? You can put something there if you like. So I could put this here. It's not wrong, and it's kind of explicitly saying it. But you don't need to put anything on the next loop. It just may, if you have a for loop that goes down a lot of lines of code, or if you had a for loop within a for loop, it's generally like it's generally good practice to put something after next so that you're clear which next is corresponding to which for. But generally speaking, you don't need to bother. Okay, so we're going to print out all the team names, which should print out if all has gone well. So let's do a debug compile. And everything is good there. And let's generate the report. And we should see a load of names appearing and the scores. So it's always a good idea to do is check the first item and the last one. So if you're writing this application professionally, you might spend a bit more time, just especially if you had more data. But what's always good is to check the first and the last one, because once they work, you're kind of pretty sure that the other stuff is pretty okay. So you know that you have the right range. So we've read so South Africa, Mexico was the first match, and the last match, the World Cup final, was Netherlands and Spain. So it did the data pretty good. So we know at this point, all we're concentrating on is reading our data, and we know that what we have is very solid, and we still haven't even thought about the report. So we don't need to worry about our report at all at the moment. Now, what we want to have a look at next is we want to look at class modules. So I'm going to just open another workbook just so that we can have a look at class modules. So let me just have a look here. Okay, so we've got a brand new workbook, and I'm just going to call it book 3. So if we insert a class module, so just in case you're not familiar with class modules, we're going to keep it very, very simple here. So a class module is something that we can store variables and methods, but we're going to keep it simple and just store variables. So for example, we could have first name here. So we'll say first name as string, and we could say, let's have, just to have a different variable, age as long. So first name as string, age as long. So how this works is that when we go into a module, so we'll go into a normal module just to test out this guy here, and we'll do just a test sub, very simple test sub here. So what we want to do is we want to create what we say in programming, it's an instant. But what we're doing is we're creating an object, and class 1 here is like a prototype. So it's like a template that we use to create our object. So we basically say O, which we'll just call it O, as new class 1. And so we've created this. So what this means is that O now has first name and it has an age. And we can just set these just like normal variables. We can set the first name to be equal to Jack, and we can say his age is 21. And then we can have another one as well. We can have O2 as new class 1. So remember, we can have as many objects as we want, but the class 1 is basically the template we're using. So in one way, it's kind of like when we say dim score as long. We're basically saying use long as kind of our template for this variable. So it's kind of similar to that in a way. So if we use O2, we have actually two variables. So we have Jack and Jill. And if we run this code and just put a breakpoint at the end, and then we'll view our watch window. So let's just look at O in the watch window. So we'll right click and add the watch and click OK. And let's hide our immediate window. And we'll come up here. And when we open O, then you can just see that the values are 21 and Jack, and O2, the values are 26 and Jill. So having these items, so what we're going to do in our application is we're going to store the different things such as win, draw, loss, goals for, and goals against. And so a class module is a really useful way of doing this. Another really useful way of using a class module is if we have a customer record and we'd store like the name, the telephone number, surname, address, city, etc. And so they're very, very useful, and to make our code readable rather than having a kind of needing an array for each person. So rather than having, say, an array and say position 1 is win, position 2 is draw, we actually have variable names. So before we go back to our application, just one other thing to have a look at here. So we can create the variable like this. So in this case, we've just created a variable, but we haven't created the object. So we haven't actually created it so far. So we create it when we use new. Now in this case, we're using set. So the idea of set is that we can use it as much as we want. So we could put set in a for loop and we could create 10 objects. But when we do dim O as new object, that always just creates one object each time the application runs. But whereas using set gives us flexibility. like we could put an if statement here. So we create our class here, and we can do stuff like add it to a collection. So let's create our dictionary here. So we'll just dim dict as. Now we mightn't have the script. Yeah, so I just have to add the reference in again. So it should be close by because it's in the other one. So scripting runtime. So again, we have the dictionary. And let me just, and so this is our dictionary, and we're going to create a new dictionary. So we've created Jack. So what we can do is we can do dictionary, and we can just give it the first name. So we can say that the first name is the key. So add the first name as the key, and then just add the object. And what that does is it adds the object of Jack to our dictionaries or collection or whatever we want to use. So then we can, once that's there, we can actually set this variable to a new class. So by setting O to new class, we actually create a new class. And in this new class, we can actually set different values, because this is now a different object than the first one. And then we can of course add this to our dictionary. So let's run this code. I hope this isn't too advanced, but this is kind of as advanced as we're going to get with this. So if we look in at our dictionary here, so we'll drop this into our watch window. Now I'm going to just save this. I just had a bad premonition here that the whole thing was going to crash and I'd be left without the code. Actually, sorry, that's the other one. It's this one that I want to save. Okay, and so we look at our dictionary here, and let's pull it up. So you can see that our dictionary has two items. It has Jack and it has Jill. So the thing to keep in mind, again, just to go over this again, when we set O like this, we create a new object, and we can set the values just like a normal variable, and then we add the item to our dictionary. So the item's in our dictionary, we don't have to worry about losing it. So when we set O to point to a new class, so O is now referencing a new class, our original one is still in the dictionary. And so we've created a brand new object here. Every time we use new, we create a new object. And then we can add this one. So even though we're using O is actually pointing to a different item. So I hope that all makes sense and it's not too advanced. But we'll step through the code anyway when I use it, and you can see exactly what it's doing. So this brings us back to the point is that we want to add our item to the dictionary. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create our own class module. So let's insert our class module. And again, our class module is very, very simple. It's just going to have all the long integers, and they're going to be just for the win. So the thing to remember is we want one object for each team. So for each team, we want a number of wins, draws, losses, goals for, and goals against. And let's call this guy, we'll call him CLS Team Calcs. Now I normally put CLS before the name of a class module, but you can put whatever you like. So let's go back to our read. So now all we've got to do is add these, is create a new object and add them to the dictionary. So as we saw, we create a new object as follows. We do set O team calc. So this is just our O variable equals, and that's new CLS. So now we have a variable of this type. So I just want to declare this obviously as a variable as well. So we just declared this, we didn't put anything in it. And then when we come to set, it creates a new one. Now we only want to create a new one if it doesn't already exist. So we just check if it exists in the dictionary. So we say if team 1 exists in the dictionary. So if it doesn't exist, so we're saying if equals false. Now we can also say not. We can also say not exists if we prefer. So equal is the very same thing. So equals false can also be not. So I have this in the code, so I leave it at that. So we create our new object, and so now we have a new object with goals and wins, and we can add values, and we want to add this to our dictionary. So we're going to add this to our dictionary, and we're going to refer to it shortly. We're going to add to it with the team name, and then we're going to add the object, and then in a minute then we're going to come back to the object and then add the values. Now also we have two teams in this, so we have team 1 and team 2, so we want to do it for both. So we read the data for team 2 as well. And so if team 2 doesn't exist, let's add team 2. So again, let's do a debug, compile, and everything is okay, so there's no errors so far. So before we do anything here, what I like to do is I like to test out that our values all worked correctly. So I'm just going to copy and paste this sub that I created. It basically just, so all this does is it basically reads through the dictionary and writes out our values to the immediate window. So we give it a dictionary and it reads through the dictionary and it writes out all the values. So we won't worry about this code because when we're doing a report, we're going to be doing the very same thing. So write to report, and that'll finish it off. And we give it the dictionary. We say, okay, this is what our dictionary looks like. So let's bring up our window. Let's clear everything in the window. So I bring up the immediate window. Control G is the shortcut. Now VBA will still write. If you don't have it open, it'll actually still write to it. So it's quite useful. So if you forget to open it, it will still write to it and you can just open and check. So when we click generate report, it should fill up with what we have in our dictionary. And what we have in our dictionary should be basically a group of teams. And all those teams, they don't have any data. So that's why we've all got zeros. So we haven't added any data for the wins, anything. We've just added the team name. So far so good. So let me just check. It looked like Mexico came up, but I think that could have been just a... Let me just clear all this again, just to make sure that it ran. I might have run it twice by mistake. Let me just click generate report just to be clear. And so, okay, I see what I've done there. Yeah, so I made one little mistake there. I actually put this in the loop and I should have put it outside the loop. So that's why it was taking so long and why it's writing out so much data. So if we run this again, it should. So it should be much quicker this time. So it just writes out the values, yeah. So it ends with Switzerland and it starts with South Africa and Mexico because they're the first team. So this was team 1 and this was team 2 of the first match and this was team 1 and team 2 of the second match and so on. And you can see we've no data there, but we know that we're actually adding something to the dictionary correctly. So everything so far so good. So we've added, so at this point we either, if something isn't in the dictionary, so say team 1 is Mexico, the first time we'll add it to the dictionary, the next time we won't add it to the dictionary because it's already there. And then we can go ahead and reference what's in the dictionary. So how we do it is as follows. We can either put it into a variable or we can directly reference it. So we know that if we want to access an item, we use dictionary and we use the key. So the key is team 1. So to get whatever the item at team 1 is, we use dictionary team 1, and this will return us the CLS, so that the team calcs object that's at this position. And we can get it out. We can create a variable like this. We can do dim o as CLS team calcs. And we can set O equals this, and then we can do stuff with it like O goal for equals, so just like we did before. Or if we want to take a shortcut, we can actually just use the dictionary and reference it this way. So it's the same. It doesn't make that much any difference. So what we're saying is goal for equals goals for plus 1, or sorry, not plus 1, it's plus whatever the value is in goals that we just read. Now this is given an error, so that normally means, let me do a debug compile. Oh, that's okay. Equals goals for, oh yeah, I see the problem. Okay, still complaining. Equals goals for, and that should be plus goal 1. So just to explain what I'm doing here, normally in programming, if we add a value, we do it like this. So x equals x plus 1. It's very common in programming. So what we're saying is evaluate what's on the right hand side and place it in x. So it's kind of counterintuitive if you're not familiar with programming. But what it does is it evaluates this first, gets the result, and then places the value here. So in other words, what this is doing in simple terms is adding 1 to x. And it's very common in programming. What we're doing here is very similar. We're taking goals for, we're saying whatever's currently in goals for, add goal to it, and then place the new value here. So essentially what we're doing is this line. We're adding goal 1 onto goal for, what we currently have. So we're summing the value. And now, again, what we can do then is goal 2 is going to work in exactly the same way. So this will be team 2. Its goals for is going to be exactly the same. And then goals against and so on. Now, because we're using dictionary 1 here a lot like this, when we use something like this with a dot, what we can actually do is we can use the with statement like that, and we can just place it in like this. We can say with goals 1 do this, and then we can do goals against. Now the only thing is the IntelliSense doesn't work that good when you do this. But we can do goals against, and then, so our goals against for team 1 is goal 2. And the same thing then, we can just copy this code again because it's similar, but just make sure that we don't have typos in it. And we do with team 2, and then these are the other way around. So goals for team 2 is goal 2, and goals against is goal 1. And so this gives us the number of goals. So if we were to run the code again and just check that what we have so far makes sense. So we click generate report. So let's look at the top one, South Africa. So South Africa, we've said, has scored 3 goals and conceded 5. So is that actually true? So how we can decide that is we can just go in and just check our data quickly. And so we look in our data, and let's have a look at South Africa. So we just type in South. So if we do, we have Africa there. So Africa, you can see, has scored 1 goal. When it was team 1, it scored 1 goal and it's conceded 4. So let's clear this filter. And then if we look at when it's team 2, now I have team 3 written there, but that's just a typo. It should be team 2. And you can see that they scored 2 goals and conceded 1. So indeed, they've scored 3 and conceded 5. So just by checking this one record, it gives us a sanity check. Now there could be other mistakes in it, but it means that we're pretty much there. So let me step through this code just to make sure that it makes sense, and we'll run it again here, and we'll just check it against the first one. So what's happening is the first time it's given us back row 1, and row 1 has South Africa and Mexico, so it's this row here. So this row is what we've got back. So the team 1 at this row is South Africa. Team 2 we can see is Mexico. And goal 1 is 1 goal, and goal 2 should be 1 goal as well, after we read from it. So that's the data we have. And we're saying, does team 1 exist in the dictionary? Of course it doesn't, because we haven't added anything yet. So we go ahead and add it. And we create a new object here so that we can place our data in it for this team. And the same thing for team 2, Mexico. It doesn't exist, so we create a new object for Mexico and add it. And then down here we reference team 1, which is South Africa, in the dictionary, and we basically update its goals like this. And we do the same then for team 2. And you can see that this gets us all our data. Okay, so now that we have that, we just want as well to calculate wins, losses and draws. And this kind of works in a similar manner. So I just copy and paste this code because it's quite similar. Basically, if goal 1 is greater than goal 2, means that team 1 has won and team 2 has lost. And vice versa, and if goal 1 is less than goal 2, then team 1 has lost and team 2 has won. And otherwise it's a draw. So we basically update whichever one that we need to do. So again, we've just added this code, and as usual when we add code, it's a good idea to run it. So let's get rid of the watch window. Actually, we'll make this the big window, and we'll bring up this immediate window, and let's clear the data here. and we'll generate our data, and you can see that we have South Africa having won one match, drawn one match, and lost one match, which is correct. Now again, if you're doing a professional application, you might spend a bit more time, you know, checking the data, making sure that it was fine and whatever. But it's always good to check the first and the last team. It's always a good place, because the bugs tend to kind of hang around in the border areas like that, because they're the type of, because generally if the first and last work, most of the time what's in between will. It's kind of at the end where you might forget to read the last row. You might miss out one record, you know, so it'll typically happen at the start or the end. And so far so good. We've written the code, we've tested that what we have is right in the dictionary, and so we're happy to go with our read. So we're finished with the reading, and now it's time to get on to our writing. So we know that we have a nice little thing here. We'll read the data from here, and we know that it works correctly. So it's nice. Now, what I'd normally do is write to intermediate. So the write to intermediate, actually, it would have been better. It doesn't matter, like, but to put it there is good, because let me just find it again. So let's get rid of it here. So to put it here, we can kind of we used it as a temporary one here. So to check that everything was fine. So we can comment it out now, and if we have issues in the future, we can just put it back in and just test. So now we're going to write the report, and we go to our write module. Now the write module, let's just pull this guy down here. So we have the write to immediate there. So the write module, we're just going to put in our constants. Now normally when you're like writing code, you kind of put in the constants as you realize you need them. You know, you kind of say, okay, I'm going to be using this value, so let's put in a constant. Now, obviously, things like rows and columns for the report, you know that you're going to use them. So we put in those, and let's then get to our main sub. So this is our main sub, the write report. So what do we want to do when we're creating a report? Well, this is more complex than last week when we were really just copying. We're just basically writing the data. Here we want to do a number of different things. And these things are as follows. We want to clear a report area. So we've that written already. So there's no real panic there. We want to create the report header. We want to write the data. Then we want to format the header, format the data, and then we want to sort the data at the end. So we just create a sub for each one of those that doesn't already exist. Now I have these as public, but actually normally we'd actually make these all private, because we don't want them called from outside here. We want them hidden and only to be available within here. So generally speaking, we'd make these private, but it depends again on the application. So now we've added these in, we debug compile. So let's start off with the easiest one. So all we're going to do with the header is basically write out the data, or write out the actual text that's in the header. So there's no data here or anything, it's just text. So let me just explain what's happening here. So we have a range which is rep start cell. So if we do a definition on, we right click, select definition on this, it gives us F3. So what is F3? So F3 is, if you look in the worksheet here, so F3 is where we're going to write this. So it's right here. So we're going to write here. And what we're doing is we're using offset to count from this, depending on which row and which column. Now in this case it's not, because we're not moving any rows, we're doing the very top row, and then we're moving to each position. So this one is 0, so we're basically offsetting 0, 0, so we're not moving, so we're writing this to F3. This is counting 0 rows, 1 column. This is counting 0 rows, 2 column, and so on. Now if I right click and do a definition, you can see where I'm getting these numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3. So they're just constants. So all that's saying is, all it's doing is basically moving over 1 each time and just writing out the value. Now again, we can just run our code just to see that that's working correctly. Because like all these things, we want to say, okay, if this is working correctly, let's move on to the next. Because if this was working wrong, or it was writing to the wrong position, then we definitely don't want to be moving on to the next part until we're sure that this part is working. Now again, formatting the header is nothing too exciting. When we format the header, we're basically just taking the header and we're just setting different attributes to the range. So for example, we get the range here, which is the current region, because that's all the data. So we get the current region and we're just getting the first row. but I mean, it's just one row at this point anyway. And what we're doing is we centered the horizontal alignment. We just set the font color to white, and we're just setting the fill color to cyan. So nothing too exciting there, just kind of standard stuff. But it makes it look nice, the report, when we have it at the end rather than just raw data. Now again, to format the data, I'll just copy this in because it's 9:10, so we don't need to waste too much time on this, because the really interesting thing is writing the data. So the format data, I mean, this kind of stuff is it's not too exciting. You don't really have to figure anything out. You just have to get your range and then apply basically the formatting to it. So again, we just use the current region. We remove the header because we want to format everything except the header, and then we basically say align stuff to the center, set the fill color, so the background color of the cell, to this, and then we set the borders here. We want to set a border around solid thin, color indexes 2, we're formatting the border, and then at the end we're just going to set the alignment left of the team. So we just want the team to be to the left. So we can just do a debug compile just to ensure that we haven't broken anything, and then we'll just run it again. So there's no data to format, but we can actually just click generate report. So okay, we got an error here, which is good. So yeah, the reason we got the error is because we don't have any data. So what we should have here is a line that says if the number of rows. So let's say range data. So what we would do here, so this will protect us against this error. So we should say if range data dot count. I'll just see. So range data dot rows dot count is 1 at the moment. So if I just add that to the watch window, it can compile the module, because let me just. So let me just set it to this line here, set next statement, and then when I go down, so it's 1. Yeah, so I was pretty sure it was, but it's always good to kind of check. So if count equals 1, then we want to exit the sub. We don't want to continue any further. But what we want to do, let me just say, what we want to do is just tell the user. So we want to say, user, there is no data to format. So we normally have kind of a more descriptive error, but that's basically what we have. So what would happen is if we come back and try to run this again in the future, it would tell us, let me just stop it there. So if we try to run this in the future and we don't have the data in, or it happens that there's no data, what this will actually do is say there is no data, or not data I've written to format, and then it will just carry on in a predefined manner. So it doesn't try to do anything else, it just says there is no data to format. So this is kind of simple error handling that protects our code. So now let's get on to the actual writing the data. So writing the data is kind of the interesting part of this. So when writing the data, what we're basically going to do is we're going to read through the dictionary. So we've got the dictionary, and we're going to do something similar to what we did in the we're going to do what we did with the dictionary. So sorry, question there. Is this video 4 in your Getting Started series? No, it's video 2. So this is application 2 from the VBA Handbook. So the VBA Handbook is a course that I sell on building 10 applications. So this is the video, or it's a workshop of application 2. So in application 2, you get like the workbook with all the steps to go through and the full code and everything. And if you get the premium version, you get the videos as well. So this is just kind of a live workshop, because I had a sale last week where I sold, or about 2 weeks ago, and a lot of new people have bought the handbook. So I just want to go through and help people kind of through it, but also for people, that haven't seen, that would like to see how an application is actually built, because it's something you don't see a lot in VBA. You see a lot about this is a for loop, this is whatever, but it's very seldom that you get to see someone showing you how to build a proper application. And so I hope that answers your question. Now, write data to report, as we said. So the first thing we want is we want some kind of variable to track. And what this is going to do is it's going to track the current row we're on. Because every time we write something to a row, we want to move to the next row. And we want to somehow track which row we're currently on. So again, very, very standard thing to do in VBAs when we're writing out stuff. So we want to read through our dictionary. And we do it as follows. Now, first thing I'll say is, normally you don't read through dictionaries. The purpose of a dictionary is really to access values quickly. But sometimes you may want to write them out, as in this case. But generally speaking, the purpose of them is to be to be strong. Okay, this is awesome. Okay, yeah, okay, glad that makes sense. Okay, so for each k in, so we're saying dictionary.keys. So we're basically saying, again, the for each loop we saw before, we're basically saying each time I want you to give me a key until we reach the end of the key. And when I have the key, I'll do as follows. So I'll do something with it. So let's create a range. Now I have this in the code inside. Doesn't matter where you put your dim statements, but it's just neater to put them outside. So just one thing to give you on a dim statement. Wherever you put the dim statement in your sub doesn't matter, because VBA basically creates all the variables at the start of the sub. So before it actually does anything, it will create all these variables. So from a functional point of view, it doesn't matter where your dim statement is. But I like to put the dim statements near where my code is, where I'm going to use them. I think it just makes the code neater. So you'll often see people, they have a sub and they have like 10 variables declared at the top. And I always think it's kind of messy. And it's very easy to leave a variable there that you no longer use. Or to have two variables that are doing the same thing. So I like to declare them just as I use them. It makes the code more readable and less confusing. So, okay, we're getting each value back. And what we want to do is we want to get our start cell. So we do that by saying set reg start. So this is the range, and we want the range to equal the report again. So this is our report sheet, and the range in our report sheet is going to be rep start cell. So again, that's F3. That's our top left cell of our report. So this is our range, and we're going to count from that every time we do something. So we're saying give us each key in the loop, and then we're using the key to give us back the current item from the dictionary. Now notice here, every time I do a for loop or a with statement or a sub, I tab in one. Again, this is called indenting the code, and it makes our code easier to read so we can see what's in each section. So the first thing I want to do is, so in the first position, I want to write out the team name. So the team name is what's important, but actually, well, we have a position first actually. So let's do the position. So the very left column is just the position. So that's just the number. So we use row count. Now remember, row count is currently on 1. And if we do rep call pause, so this is basically just the first column. So it's position 0. So this is going to be row 1, position 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign that to the current row count, which is the current number. So in other words, when we write the first value, it'll be 1, the second value will be 2, and so on. So that gives us the number in our table, so we can see which team was first and second. So then we add our team like this, and we want the team to equal the key. So remember, we can use also, we can get it from the item, but we're going to just use it as the key here. And the offset key equals key. Now, to get the number of matches played, what we want to do is we want to get the value win and the value loss and the value draw from the current team. So we use, so this is the current team. This will give us back the current team. This is the key. So we can just use dot. So we say win plus draw and plus loss. So wins, the number of wins, the number of draws, and the number of losses give back the number of matches that a team played. And I'll just copy out the last couple because there's no point in typing out all these, because after this is the same. So goal difference, in case you're not familiar with football, goal difference is essentially goals for, so the goals scored minus the goals conceded. And that's what we have. Now I have these split. If you use an underscore here, what it does is it splits up the line. So let's delete this and just put them all in one line. I probably did this just to make it easier to read in the formatting, but So we're reading through our dictionary and we're writing out our value. So I'm going to pose an interesting question here. So let's look at what this does first of all. So this is written position 1, and it has written. So let's split this out. So it hasn't worked correctly. So we can see that we haven't read the right value. So if we go back and we check, we can just see that we haven't added the team. So we haven't moved this on. So we can so if you see that kind of error, just go back and just make sure all your constants, they should be in the right order. So if we go to the top, say for example, it should be this one first, second, third, fourth, and we can see easily if the values are wrong, we can see easily that it's one of those that is off. So we should have team played, then we should have team won. So we should have win, draw, loss. So let's add those guys in. And that's won, draw, loss, for, against, diff. So let's run that again this time, and it should work correctly now. So generate report again. And you can see that it has the values. Now, this is very interesting. It only wrote out one team here, and the team I wrote out, and there's a reason for this. I deliberately haven't added the last line yet. And one of the clues, if you see this, is that the team I wrote out is actually the last team it comes to. So what it actually did was, it wrote out to the current row count, but it didn't actually, because we didn't increment this, the next time row count is still 1. And row count is still 1 and it never changes. So it just keeps overriding the same teams. So just to demonstrate this, let's put a breakpoint here. So let's generate this again. So when this stops, if we look back in the code, you can see it's South Africa. So if we run it on again, and we can see it's Mexico. So it just keeps writing the teams, but it never actually moves down. So to get it to move down, we do the very standard line. We just add 1 to row count, and we do this by assigning row count equals row count plus 1. That's 2 plus 1. And then we'll just run it on, get rid of our breakpoint, and you'll see that it did all the data. So we're probably missing South Africa or whatever, but so let's just run it again, and this time it should have 32 teams, and it has. So that's almost everything. So one more thing that we want to do is we want to sort. So we're kind of happy with all that we have so far, but of course the data is no good because it's confusing to look at. We want our data to be ordered, so we want it to be sorted. So sorting is actually quite straightforward. It's one of those things you can get kind of caught up in it, but once you actually realize what it's doing, it's actually straightforward. So what we want to do is we want to create a range and sort it. So we do range data as range, and we're going to get a key. We're going to get 2 keys. We're going to sort by the wins, and we're also going to sort by the goal difference. So let's create a variables for all these guys, and let's push down here a bit. And let's get rid of our watch window as well. Okay, so far so good. So what we're doing is we're setting range data, and we're setting range data equals. So again, we're just going to get, so this is just like what we got up above, and the rep start is F3. So we're getting F3, and we're saying give us all the rectangular data. So give us everything. And also, as usual, we want to get rid of the header. We don't want to sort on the header. So what we do is we just use our normal resize. We use our offset. So remember, offset will move down a range 1. So that moves down a range 1. And then we resize that. So we can do it kind of together here. Range data, the number of rows, and the count of those minus 1. And this should give us back our proper region that we want. So basically the region without the header. And so now we have a region we want to sort. So we sort by using the sort function of range. So that takes 2 keys, and one of course is key 1, and we want to specify it's descending. And then we have range. So then the second key we want to sort on, if the first key is equal, is going to be range key 2, and of course that's descending as well. And so we just need to get these actual keys at this point. So set range key 1 equals RG data, and then the column, and of course we're just going to use the same column constant. So see why it's useful here having this column. So we're going to use 1 in this case. We've used these columns in a lot of places. Now if I right click here and do definition, you see that it's a tree. Now if I wasn't using this, what would happen is everywhere that we see column in this code, you just have the number 3 like this. And if you come back to your code in like a month's time and you look and you start seeing 3 and 4 and 5 everywhere, you're kind of thinking, what's all these values about? And you can't just change, say, number 4 everywhere, because it could mean different things. But if you come back to your code and see this, you say, okay, that's fairly straightforward. And you know that if you change the value here, it will change everywhere in your code. So their value will be reflected. So just again, just to emphasize the usefulness of using consts, which are very, very simple to use and at the same time very, very powerful. So this is key 1, and now we want key 2, and again key 2. And using a const makes it very easy because they're in a format. We know that we want the goal difference, so we can just do control space and it brings us up all the kind of ones that are similarly spelled. And this gives us, so if we run this now, it should sort everything correctly. So let's generate a report, and you can see that there was a mistake, and that is because I've column there and it should be columns. So let's run it on again. Reference was not valid. Okay, let me do this again. Clear report. Let's do a debug compile. Okay, and generate a report. And reference is not valid. So we have a range here. Let me just check that everything. So when we get an error like this, what's always a good idea to do is just to check the values. And let me just add this to our watch window. So we just add the values to our watch window. So just to check that everything is okay. So it hasn't given us back an error. So let's just check even our address. So our address is F4 to N35. So that's pretty good. The range key, we just added down here, and the address of range. And so that seems to be good, H4 to H35, and range key 2 then, we'll drop it down. And that's M4 to M35. And so reference is not valid. So what we can do is, we divide and conquer is basically a technique for fixing these kind of things. And so let me just run through. So it ran that time. So let me just put this back. And now it ran. Yeah. So let's clear this report and let's generate this report again. And it ran fine. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that happened, because I didn't actually fix anything that time. But also one thing with the range, I actually want the range to offset. There's one other thing. I want the range to offset. I don't want to include. So you see the position column here. I don't want to include that in my sort. So let me just generate this report again. And you can see that it's sorted on wins. So we have 6. So Spain are on top, Netherlands, then Germany and Argentina. And you can see Germany's on top because their goal difference is superior. Now if we change that column to Argentina. So say we change that column to be goal scored. It won't make a difference for those. But for Brazil and Uruguay have a worse goal difference, but they've actually scored more goals. So if we just change this to goals scored, so let's change that to 4, and we generate this report again. So you can see that Uruguay have now skipped ahead of Brazil because we're doing it on goals for. So you can see how easy, because we're using columns like this, how easy it was for us to change our code. So yes, so why did you print the header? Now you must skip it into the code. Yeah, I guess we could. I mean, I guess we didn't have to. Yeah, we didn't have to. We could have put the header in last, and then we don't need to skip it. Yeah, we could. I would have saved us that line of resizing or anything. So we could have done it that way either. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter. Normally, what I do is like I have a sub, and I basically get the current region, and the sub gets the current region, and if I pass it true, it will like give back the header, and if I pass it false, it doesn't. So I guess it's something I don't think about so much. But yeah, you're right. Like, I could have left the header part to the end. Rick, you say using range key. Okay, I'm not sure. That's probably from back when I was going through the dictionary. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much this finished. So let's run it on 2014 as well, just to see. So sorry, Rick. I'm not sure what you mean, but yeah, if you just ask me again if you want. I'm going to be here for a while anyway, taking questions. So we've run this again, and this time Germany are at the top with 6. So this is from 2014, and we go down on wins, and you can just see the goal difference and goals scored. So it's now sorting on goals scored if the wins are the same. So why this is useful is that if we decide to come along and say, okay, let's get the results from all the World Cups. So we get the results from all the World Cups back to 1930. As long as we use the same format, we put one in each sheet, and we lay them out in the same format, this application will actually work on them all. All we need to do is change the data validation here to have all the years, and it will actually read all the data from any World Cup in here. And that's so the whole point is that we're making a very, very flexible and very easy to update application. So that's basically application 2 in a nutshell, or maybe not so much in a nutshell. So maybe sometimes people may find the class module, if it's the first time that you've seen the class module or the dictionary, you may find them just a little bit advanced. But I have blog posts on both of those, so I put up the dictionary already. But if we go to if you just go to the main page of my website, so macromastery.com, you'll just see like it has a list of all the main posts. So the dictionary is here under popular posts, and the other one that I was saying is class modules. So that was my fourth last post. So if you go to class modules, it covers class modules from very simple terms all the way down to kind of more advanced techniques that we use with the class modules. And there's also another post I have on objects and stuff like that, which is helpful too when you're dealing with class modules. So again, if you go to the dictionary, so the dictionary, what I came up with when I wrote these first, I used to have like all the information, and then I go back and say, okay, I get the information, but I just want to quickly know how to do something with the dictionary. So I came up with an idea of doing all these kind of quick guides at the top of a post. So you can just go into the post and get kind of the quick, if you need the stuff quickly, you can get it. And so it has everything here. It mentions the binding that you need, the reference. This is how you add an item. This is how you check if an item exists. This is how you remove an item. And this is how you loop through all the items in a dictionary and get the number of items. And then it goes down and explains everything in simple terms. So yeah, so that concludes application 2. I hope it made sense, and I hope it's clear. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll be here for the next 10 minutes anyway. One thing that I just say is, when you're going through the applications yourself, just type out the code. Because it's easy to just copy and paste and go through it. But if you type out the code, it just makes you learn so much more. You just really get into what you're doing. And most of the people that come back to me and say they've really learned a lot of stuff, and they come back and say, I've tried this and I've tried that and I've run into trouble with this and that. And it's always when they're trying to do something by typing in the code, and they come to me and say, can I do this, can I do that? And when I show them what to do, they really get a grasp of how it works and why that worked. And it makes such a difference to do that. And again, like if you run into any problems, or if for some reason it doesn't work, by all means, like, email me, because I can resolve these issues very, very quickly. Now, what is good to do first is try and solve it yourself first, because that really that really kind of really helps you, like when you're learning. And then if you just get completely stuck, just drop me an email. Or if you want to know like why you do it one way and not another way, like feel free to drop me an email. So again, and so if there's any questions, please feel free to go ahead. I hope I didn't break anyone's brain with all the dictionary and class module stuff. So my pop filter is gone. So again, feel free to ask any questions if you have them. If you like, or if the question's a bit longer, or if you have a few questions, just drop me an email as well. So it's paul@macromastery.com. That's that's my email address. So Mark, thanks. That's very helpful. Yeah, it does take time to go through it. Yeah, it definitely does take a bit of time to get through it. Yeah, I put application 1. So for anyone that has the premium version of the handbook, I put application 1. So last week's workshop, I placed that workshop in up on Gumroad. So it's part of the package. So I added last week's webinar up there. So if you have the premium package, you should see that included as one of the videos. So Rick, you're saying offset versus range. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I like to use offset. I like to avoid using plus ones like that, because the reason is that when you have a for loop and you have plus ones, you tend to have in your code like kind of plus ones kind of around the place. So I don't know. I just think it's neater when you use it as offset. To be honest, it doesn't make that much difference. It really depends. It depends on your specific code, which kind of suits it the most. So yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's not that big a deal. So, well, glad. Yeah, thanks, Angel. Glad that you found it useful. And Machi, how are you doing? Glad that you enjoyed it. It's good to hear from you again. Hope your VBA is going very well. Well, be putting them all up on Gumroad. Yeah, I can. I mean, already if you have the premium version of the handbook, there's already workshops up there. Some of them are taken from live. I think half are live and half are ones I created from my desktop because I wasn't happy with the original live versions. But I can put this one up on Gumroad tomorrow once YouTube have processed it and all. Yeah, no, that's no problem. Yeah, no problem at all, Mark. You're welcome. Excellent one, sir. Very nice. Lots of good ideas. Yeah, glad you enjoyed it. Okay, everyone. I'm going to leave it there. Um, Yeah, when this thing is processed by YouTube, so tomorrow sometime I'll put this up in Gumroad. So if you have the VBA Handbook premium version with the videos or any of the versions with the videos, I'll add this one to those as well. Okay, thanks everyone, and yeah, next week I plan to have a webinar next week. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the applications or if it's just going to be a general VBA one, but it'll be VBA. I'll be having one next week anyway. So have a good week, and I will talk to you then, and I'll send on the email about that as well. Okay, thanks everyone.